Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Beef Loaf. This show is being powered by From the 108 and FromThe108.com, where you can get all of your top content, blogs, podcasts, and videos, including the world-famous Sunday Soak. You can get all of our merch there as well, including our infamous Wave Sucks and hashtag 108 in Garbs. This show is brought to you by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat. That's how we get paid and keep making this brand of content that you know and love. Tonight's guest, I love that bell. He's the host of the Future Sox podcast, as well as the lead editor at the site, which is now affiliated with SoxMachine.com, a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and a producer of the Burnsy and Holmes Show, which airs daily on 670 The Score right here in Chicago. Mike Rankin, welcome to the Au Jus, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Beef. What's going on, man?
Nothing much.
This is how's this podcast going, by the way? What motivated you to prop this whole thing?
So every year we have an annual 108 meeting. We get together, me, Treasy, my Sox owner. We get together in my basement. We drink way too much beer. Mostly, we'll start with Bourbon County Stouts, and we'll knock down like 4 of them. So we really kind of get into the creative space. But one of the things we realized in the 108 podcast is people have been telling us for years, it goes too long. I love you guys, but it's 2.5 hours. Okay, we're shorten it to 2 hours. Okay, we short. Finally, my thought was, let's just pull some baseball out of it. I'll do that, and then we can do more goofy shit on the main show. So in an effort to shorten the main show, I decided to create my own podcast. It's going to be baseball-centric, and I figured I have an opportunity to dig deep on some topics. So the very first one I did with Treasy, we did the fourth outfielders, and we spent 40 minutes digging in on fourth outfielders we'd like the Sox to have. Last week, we got in some trouble. Josh Nelson and I talked about things that worried us about Andrew Vaughn. Maybe some of the audience didn't appreciate how worried we were about certain aspects. By the way, we both still think Andrew Vaughn could be great. We're just like pointing out things that are like of concern to us. So I'm glad to have you on today because, you know, there's a ton to talk about on the prospect side. And I think there's like I've told Josh Nelson about this before. There's something where you have to be able to speak prospect sometimes to listen to the prospect podcast. You guys do a good job of not going way jargony, but if you try to listen to something like a national type thing about your team, it's like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm just a regular fan of the team. It's hard to dig in. So I thought having you on, we get a chance to get in there and I can ask questions that the layman might want to ask and kind of push it so this way that the regular fan that's chugging beers in the stands with me can understand what's going on.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It's a tall task, but we'll do it.
If you can get me to understand it, everyone else will be understanding. Now, before we get into all the fun stuff, I've had a beef for you now. It's over 2 years I've had a beef with you, Mike. And I've been on your podcast, and I'm happy to finally return the favor and get you on here. I was going to bring this up earlier. I've tried to have you on the 108 podcast, but two things have stood in the way. Number one, we've had James on. It's James, whatever. But when we get to like, we need, I want to talk prospect stuff. If Sox stuff comes up in the way, it sometimes blocks it. The other guys, let's do this, whatever. But also, the boys are friendly with Sleepy Harold. We've known Steve for a long time, and he sits in the seats a lot of times with us in the past. So we've had him on there. So I've had a hard time I want to have you on. I mean, I'm not saying fuck Steve, but, I'd rather have you on there and talk a little to mix it up, get some different personalities on there. So I'm glad we got you on here. It should be much better. But we do got beef, all right? And here's the thing. You put out a blog, and I say you, I mean the proverbial you, Future Sox, put out a blog on December 31st of 2020. This is the pandemic year. Okay, we were all inside, so we were all doing a lot more content than normal. And you had me on your show that year. And this blog was the top podcast of the year. And I'm going through the list. I'm like, I got to be in the beef. I killed it when I was on your show. I was goddamn unbelievable like I always am. And I go through the list. I don't find myself. I'm going to put this list up on the board, okay? These are all the people and names and everything that were on the show and then you're saying ahead of them. Okay, so Keith Law, first off, I like Law's work, but he's also the neighborhood around the ballpark's bad kind of guy, right? I'll give you Kylie McDaniel. I'll give you Jackson. He's my friend. I don't want to hurt his feelings to tell him I'm more entertaining than him. All right, Matt Spiegel's a great entertainer on live radio, on the podcast form, the Beefos. Same thing with Alyssa. Alyssa's super talented. She's better at everything than me, well, except for being podcast guest. Okay, Long and Hagen's fine. Julie Brady's good. Look, I have more career WAR than Blake Rutherford and Mick Rodolfo combined. All right, Sean Williams. I don't know if this is a basketball player or what. Jerry Kelly is around my weight, so maybe we'll get that one. Could be okay. Josh Norris. I don't know if it was Chuck Norris. Maybe we go with Chuck Norris in this. Okay, Garrett Crochet and Andrew Vaughn, I'm good with them because they're top prospects. I get you want to put that in there. Devin DeYoung, look, if you got a member of Sticks, I'm actually okay with that as well. Kevin Zepak's just one of your buddies. Give me a break, okay? I'm an outside. This is just like having your friend. This is like me saying Treasy was the top guest on the 108 podcast. Get out of here, you know? So give me an explanation. What's the deal here? How come I didn't make that list?
All right, can I have the list again? I mean,
yeah, I'll put this list back up. Yeah,
look at the names. Okay, first and foremost, we want to promote product. Okay, Future Sox. There's a lot of value, and look, Santa Ramita's on there twice. It's because that was a pretty damn good episode, right? That's all I'm saying. Sean Williams has insight because he was there in Arizona, seeing these prospects firsthand. Beef.
Yeah.
Arizona watching these Arizona Fall League products and some of the Arizona League stars early in the year. I don't know. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Pandemic year. Look at all these names. Thanks for promoting that. I'm looking at almost forgot about it. We talked to Garrett Crochet. I mean, Josh Nelson obviously had that relationship. Jared Kelly was a really fun interview. Josh Norris is somebody that we rely on big time. So listen, nothing against you, but a lot of these people, as I went through it. Now, here's the thing. Twice I went through this blog. And
yes, you did. So that's why I was extra mad. You put it out there once.
Right.
And I wasn't in it. And then it's like you put out again. I thought they're rectifying the wrong. They're getting the beef in there. No beef. They're like, fuck Beef Loaf. He sucks.
Look, we made it right. We had you on how many times? I think we've had you on 3 or 4 times.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, absolutely. And it's a joke, obviously. That's not. And those are people skilled at media and our players, and people have great insights at prospects. I have none of those. I just come on to entertain. So I understand. I get it. But every time you guys call, I'm definitely coming on. There's no question.
I say this, Beef. We love talking to you. It's enlightening. You force us to think differently whenever you're on the show. So we thank you for that. Yeah, always good.
I appreciate that, my friend. Next up here, I'm a listener, so I listen to the Future Sox podcast lots of times, and especially I like that you guys are kind of consistent where it's like the Tuesdays it's kind of dropping. So that's like always my day to listen to you guys. I push everybody else aside. You guys are first. The last podcast I listened to, I don't know if you were being facetious, if you were being obtuse, Mike, claiming you don't know FV from Fangraphs, which is future value, the way they value their prospects. But let me tell you, for me, someone who's a noob, why this is so good. I'm going to put up a little graph, and this is like, I'll just put the hitters up. This is how they kind of rate the hitters on the FV scale, and this is for prospects. So if you go to fangraphs.com and you go to their prospects section, you can go to a section called the board and search for your team or any team and kind of like filter for prospects, whatever. And what I have up on the board here is just for the YouTube group is showing them the number ratings for a particular player. So like a 45 is kind of a low-end regular. Someone who's maybe a platoon bat. A 55 is above average regular. Now, the reason I bring up 55 is because that's what they have rated Colson Montgomery at right now. And now he's only 20 years old. And my eyes light up when I see they're projecting at a minimum right now, average regular. He hasn't even gotten to the power yet. I can't wait until he has a season in the minors. It's 30 home runs. And then that thing's going to shoot up. And when you start getting to these higher numbers, and they don't really ever... I've only seen 170 since I've been watching Fangraphs, and that was Wander Franco. But when you start getting like a 60 rating, that's a stud. Like you have a star player in your minors. And the White Sox, I mean, they got a couple guys on the doorstep. Montgomery's 55 and Brian Ramos is 50. But I'll tell you why, Mike, just because you disagree with Eric Longenhagen's thoughts on some of the prospects, let me tell you why the FV is valuable for me. I'm a noob. It's nice and easy for me to compare prospect in this farm system versus prospect in that farm system because we always get the third ranked prospect in this team's top 10 is not the same in the third ranked in that top 10, which is true. But then me, the noob, I'm like, okay, where the fuck do I go from there? And FV is a nice extension of it where it kind of gives you a rating. It's not perfect. Like a 55 here and a 55 there. They're not exactly the same, but close enough where I can say, okay, that's kind of similar prospect. So for me, who doesn't know anybody, and especially because I'm an accountant, having a number on it like that is nice and easy for me to track and say, okay, that's kind of close enough.
No, I understand totally. I think for me, though, it's not that I have a problem with future value. It's just I don't like how it's distilling an entire prospect to one number. Mm-hmm. I kind of look at the skill set and look at the rank of each skill set, arms, speed, power, throw, and all that stuff. And I look at the grades, on a 20/80 scale, and then I make up my own opinion based on reports, how they're handling certain sequences. If they're a hitter, they can handle certain pitches and tendencies. I like to gather as much information as I can about tendencies specifically, and then also kind of related to how they grade individual skill sets. It's not that I don't like future value. It's hard to project, and it's hard to buy into that one number because over weeks prospects change, and we don't necessarily know the changes that are going on with a prospect or within a prospect's game, or why they're struggling, what happened, if they're working on something different. So I like to keep an open mind on like the flowing aspect of it, but I also wonder how closely those fan graphs are following these prospects, if they're boots on the ground people, or if they're just kind of rehashing some of the content that we like to do. It is distilled, but at the same time, there's more to it. So that's all I have about the Fangraphs future value grading scale. It's just, to me, it's more than just one number.
Understood. And understood. And if you want to get in deep, yes, I agree. And also, we always get warned as an average fan, don't scout the stat line, right? So don't scout the FV. It's take it as one piece of info and to combine it with the rest. And when you guys had the discussion, James also brought up the point that you're bringing up now too, is like just kind of read everything. Get a feel for how everyone thinks about it, because they're not all going to think alike. And I banged on Keith Law in the beginning there, but I like Keith Law's his rankings usually because they're different. They're disparate than the rest of the group. And so I get some info from that. Same thing with Baseball Prospectus. I always find Baseball Prospectus leaning in different directions than I see some of the rest of the groups. I like that. It's good for me because I'm like, okay, I don't know a lot about, so everything I get to read, this adds more to the database. Matty Mitch, thank you for the drink. Says, do your thing, Beef, and cheers to coffee. Yes, I'll cheers your coffee versus my wine. I appreciate you. We're doing white wine tonight, kids. I think we're going to stick with the white wine on the au jus. It's been treating us well on this podcast. We got high energy here. All right, Mike, I'm done busting your balls. Now I'm here to extract information from you. You're the best guy to talk to about all this stuff. So what I want to do is 5 questions on the White Sox farm, specific prospects, all this stuff kind of mixed in. I figured we just go down the line, and let's just go in whatever direction we want here. Like I said, generally, this is a shorter podcast than the 108 podcast, and I think it'll stay that way today. But if we want to go off on a tangent, I think that's totally fair. So, ready for question number 1?
Let's do it. I really do appreciate what you said about Keith Law, though, because that's somebody who is sort of contradictory to what we're typically used to seeing. Baseball Prospectus is also sort of on a skewed end. But when we look at Major League Baseball Pipeline and Baseball America, they're essentially on the same page about a lot of things. But you have Keith Law jumping in there, and he has a unique perspective because he identifies different traits and values them differently.
Yep.
So, like, all of that perspective is so important. That's why I don't discount Fangraphs value. It's just I love to take in all the information I can. And what you're talking about in the value of understanding what prospects in turn becoming, and this is what I'm looking forward to in speaking with. I know we're going to talk about Chris Getz a little bit, but it's just understanding the player and how they're facing their skill or their competition, their level of competition, because we'll talk about Project Birmingham, and then over the last 3 years, we're seeing the fallout of Major League Baseball shaving down minor league baseball and taking away sports season, and I mean that's a massive deal. You're talking about 40 players not having an opportunity to especially when you're getting into the draft and you're seeing some of these players. The rounds were 40 in the past, and even before the 40 round distinction, it was as many rounds as you wanted. You could take as many players as you wanted, and it seemingly never ended. But now it's down to 20. So baseball is seeing a different landscape in the way that players are developing. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first question out here, you mentioned Project Birmingham. So back kind of right after Project Birmingham happened, we talked briefly on the 108 podcast, and Treasy and I were both positive of it because it was something outside the box, something we'd not heard of. So we're like, okay, we're interested to see where it goes. He wrote a blog shortly after that, kind of general questions, and he actually said they're questions for you guys, so I figured I'd bring one to the show. And his question related to Project Birmingham says, what problem were the White Sox trying to solve with Project Birmingham? And my quick follow-up was, it just kind of a clever way to get scouts to all evaluate in one spot, get all your top prospects there. So if you could, just give us the 10,000-foot view of what Project Birmingham was, and then if you think it was trying to solve a specific problem, or if it was just trying to kind of give some new fresh data to a scout group that could maybe give some feedback to the White Sox.
it was interesting this year. Now Charlotte ran sort of that's ran alongside Major League Baseball schedule, just in case they needed players to fill in the roster near the end of the season. So they played late into the year, and so did Double A. And once Single A finished, there was an opportunity for the White Sox, and at that point, a lot of these players, almost all of the players, were either in their first or second full seasons in professional baseball, and especially those who were experiencing their first full professional season, it was starting to take a toll on their body. I mean, that's a lot of at bats, a lot of innings the pitchers were participating in. So you think about it, are you expecting them to produce, or what is the end goal of play?
Right.
But when you're looking at the numbers, it's bad. Luis was the only player at the plate essentially who had success statistically. Well, when you look at all the other names, like I said, first, second year full professional season struggled, but also at the same point, to me, it was an opportunity for the organization to gather sort of like talented prospects and put them up against the competition that was 2, 3, 4, 5 years their superior and see how they handled it. Because you look at the names, these are a lot of the core prospects in the top 30. So this is their opportunity. Yes, other scouts and they're in structure together into one spot. And it's not necessarily like Schaumburg, but it's kind of like what happened in Schaumburg in 2020 when you have a controlled sense of development there. In the Double A side of things, when it comes to like the area competition, it's more or less showing what these prospects can expect, because they believe those who were in Double A are going to be a part of the farm system as parts of like their development cycles, as well as those who so they got to make ultimate impact at the big league roster. So all in all, it was a project. Nobody's done it before, but I think it was opportunistic because when they did it, it was a matter of, hey, these players are sort of similar in skill set. They're younger, and they're all done with their Single A season. So we expect them to fly through the system either next season or a year after. So let's give them a taste. And then it's just a matter of how they responded. One player that I'd love to talk about is Christian Mena. Mena was a guy that we were tipped off to in a podcast previously by Ben Burr of Baseball America, who covers all the international side of things and so good at what he does. And whenever he points a new signing to us, we kind of took note and we kept our tabs on it. And Mena signing 2019 into 20, as a 17-year-old, Badler told us, "Hey, keep an eye on Christian Mena." So we said, "Okay, we did." Now, when you look at the numbers, it translated big time, and the kid had unbelievable amounts of success on paper. And he, as a 19-year-old, participated in Double A Birmingham. Now, I know, Beef, you're trying to get to a prospect like this, and let me try and sell you on this prospect real quick.
Okay, I love it.
Mena was somebody who got players hitters out at advanced A at a young age with a secondary pitch that he threw way, way too often. I mean, but it was filthy. I mean, he had a pitching ball that would just get everybody out. And largely, the success that we saw on paper was due to the fact that he would throw this pitch that Single A players aren't used to seeing. You get moved up to advanced A, he was still getting guys out. But the thing about Christian Mena is that he fills up the strike zone. He threw 90 to 92 during that period. Mm-hmm. But we're going to find out that he's putting on weight, and his fastball jumped a couple miles per hour in velocity. He's sitting low to mid 93 to 95, and he can get it up there to 95, 96 when he wants to. That's a huge development in a 20-year-old's game who we can anticipate to pitch in Double A. Maybe not to start the year. I think he will start the year in Double A, but we'll see him. And that just tells me that the White Sox believe he can skyrocket through the system as long as he can handle the workload. And the fact that he's throwing his fastball at a higher velocity is huge for me. He's just got to do more. He's got to throw his fastball more so he set up that devastating break. So I'm excited. What can I say?
Well, I'm happy to hear that about Mena, because we're told not to scout the stat line, but the stat line was really fucking good for Christian Mena. Like, looking at it, it's like he's young and he's at this age and he's getting everybody out. It's like, wait a minute, I want to be excited about that. But then, as I told you, in the back of my head, I saw Spencer Adams back when he was the number 3 prospect in the Sox system in like 2017 or whatever, or 2016. I was like, wait a minute, don't tell me the tall athletic guy, he starts off good and doesn't make it. So this makes me feel a little more comfortable. I'm not ready to get my Mena jersey yet, but if he starts doing it at AA, then I'm gonna pretend I was in on the bandwagon early. I'm gonna get myself some shit and I'll be all set up. Before we dive back into the Project Birmingham, Chris McGowan, thank you for the drink, my friend. It says cheers. Everyone, don't be shy. Always feel free to tip, just like you do on the 108 podcast. With Project Birmingham, you bring up a great point. Is just like testing them, seeing what they could do there. I wonder how much of it is just like we perceive these weaknesses in the player's game, or this is our plan for working with this player next year. Let's see if that unearths itself in the limited experience they get at AA, which is going to be basically the toughest competition that they're going to face in the minors. AAA has now become a holding pen for guys you just want to hang on to until you might have to use guys in the majors. AA seems to be like the test ground a lot of times for many of these teams. So I kind of wonder how much of it was just that. But you're right. Like, not only were the players tired at the end of the year, they're not getting everyday plate appearances once they get to this spot. They have to switch off because there's so many people there. This was one of the things that Teresa and I were talking about. It's kind of a weird situation. It's almost like a training camp or something, because you're not getting all the reps anymore, whatever stop you were at before where you were starting every day. Now it's going to be like every other day or something like that. So have you heard any whispers? Is there anyone in particular that showed out great there, or was like, like a little underwhelming in that spot? Or has it been tight-lipped as to kind of what the feedback from the org is on the Project Birmingham?
I personally haven't heard any feedback from the organization regarding that, but I know that Chris Getz was, obviously he's going to talk positively about the experience, but what you said is absolutely true, and I think it's also important to mention that the amount of players on the AA Birmingham roster across September was massive. So you didn't have guys who were out there already who played a full season playing every day. So it's a little. I'm excited that Colson Montgomery participated. I'm also excited Wes Cath participated. Somebody who definitely does belong in AA and shouldn't have honestly been at AA, but they do believe in those types of players. And obviously Montgomery, the top prospect, but Wes Cath was an investment out of high school in his own right. So you're talking about an aggressive assignment. And to me, overall, it's let's gather these best prospects in our farm system and show them what to expect, and then make a judgment call. Be like, hey, if this is where you're getting exposed, and it's a limited sample, but you learn a lot about what a player can handle. So we're not going to really see the fruits of this project for a year or two.
Right.
It's an experience that you can mark down on tape, say, you tried, know what to expect, now what?
I love it. A couple comments I want to pull up right now. This is from the initial segment. Baloney says, pump himself back like he never off. Look, if I don't feel confident about myself, Baloney, no one else is going to. And then Sean Anderson says, beef over Speaks. We'll leave that one lay the way it is, but that's a funny inside joke. And then Sean Anderson also, are you really good with Vaughn? I don't know if I'm good with Vaughn. I want him to be great, though. That's what it is. I want him to be great. I think he can solve the problems that he has right now. But the 1,000 plate appearances in, he's got a few issues. Let's not sugarcoat it. Mike, I'm glad that you brought up Chris Getz, because Chris Getz has been much maligned on the 108 podcast. Treasy has been beside himself that Chris Getz is getting promoted and we're not getting the fruits of the labor at the majors. We feel we're not. The big trade-off happened, and a lot of those guys have made it to the majors. But the next group there, the tank picks, that group of drafts, the 18 through 2020 drafts, and then the subsequent drafts, now we're finally starting to get some top 100 prospects of the pile, basically, but we haven't gotten a lot of the fruits of the labor at the major league level. So the question here is, why should the regular fan like me have optimism about the Chris Getz farm? Because they've ever since the sell-off, ever since we've traded for these guys and all those guys graduated, this has been a bottom three farm system, and it's going to safely be one into the rankings to start the year here, as far as the way I can read it. They've gotten some pop-up. There's been some good stuff, like Colson Montgomery and Brian Ramos, to name the top two off of my head. But why should it give us some tangible reasons why me, the fan, should say, look, Chris Getz is doing a good job, even though we can't see what good job he's doing?
So, so there's a little, right? I do want to mention that Chris Getz, he values continuity, and when you're Bears fan like we are too, continuity and collaboration kind of like hits us, jars us a little bit. But I mean, that to me, if you're in a baseball sense, if you expect to produce value and you expect to develop and win with the way that the White Sox are kind of restricted in spending, and the way that Jerry Reinsdorf wants to win on his own accord and how he feels it's appropriate, there could be value within the organization. So let's start there. When the White Sox decided to start their rebuild in 2016, it was barren. They're really the farm system when they over the 6 years. Let's go back to 2010. 6 years that they were trying to maintain relevance. They get in. Who am I thinking of? Big left-handed power bat that was awful in 11 and 12. Adam Dunn, right? They go Adam Dunn. They go Adam Roach, and they try and go in with Melky Cabrera and Zach Duke. Oh man, all these investments. David Robertson. And the farm that they were trading away really weren't losing anything. And yeah, they traded away Fernando Tatis Jr., but I'm not going to get into that. That's the player that they lost, yes. But everybody else, they're looking at the returns. You're just like, these guys are nothing. I mean, if you care about Trace Thompson, then, I mean, come on.
Right.
So the White Sox needed a different vision. And it did sort of lead to – and Chris Getz did enter the organization in 2017 and was overseeing the minor league operation for years. Were getting promoted in 20, but throughout that time, slowly but surely, they were seeing differences, largely because of the poking that Chris Getz was doing around the organization to say, hey, we need more player development. We need to rely more on analytics, and we just need some electronic machines. We want to set up an indoor facility near Arizona to measure biomechanics. Let's get all of this stuff in here and advance ourselves into the current century of baseball and development.
Right.
First and foremost, like, there's value there. So when Chris Getz continues as the assistant general manager, now he's overseeing the operation. Edward Teaford is somebody who oversees the pitching side, and I'm a big fan of the way that they're developing pitching. It really hasn't translated yet. We'll get to reasons why, but the pace at which developing their pitchers, and I mean not overwhelming them in the minor leagues. So that's something that I really give Chris Getz and the rest of the staff. Andy Barquette is a recent addition to the front office as well. He's a minor league hitting coordinator for the organization. There's consistency in pacing in the way that they want to develop their prospects. So I give them a lot of credit in that regard. Chris Getz also has a lot to do with the draft strategy and the decision to hire Mike Shirley. They moved over Nick Hostetler. Mike Shirley came in. And also credit to Marco Patti. You look at the organization and beyond, the amount of national prospects that Patti has brought in and that we're seeing on the top 30 list of Sox prospects is kind of jarring. And the way that he's doing it is on lower expense.
It's a little unconventional. Usually in those markets, you're spending a couple $1 million to get your top guys. Yeah. Right now, the Sox top 10 is probably going to feature 6-ish of his guys. And Treasy and I have bagged on Marco Patti too, but right now I'm starting to shut up on Marco Patti because now they're starting to filter up into the top 10 lists, and you got guys that are starting to make, like Lenny Sosa made it to the majors. Like you got guys coming up to the majors, and we're starting to see like, okay, here there's some fruits of this labor, and so it's like it's a good sign.
So you're absolutely right. And looking at some of these names, like Brian Ramos is a cheaper signing in terms of the international market. I mean, I think the Padres, James Fox and I talked about it today on our Future Sox podcast. You can listen to it every Tuesday. The Padres signed a catcher, I believe, for $5.6 million. White Sox don't do that in the international market. No. Some of the in this class, 200,000, 500,000, 700,000. But you look at the names over the last 3 years, and you look at the prospect rankings. Jose Rodriguez, Brian Ramos, Christina is a very inexpensive signing, and Wolf Veras. So many examples that come into play here. So that strategy, I want to give credit to Marco Patti there, but it's the front office being in lockstep and how to develop this organization. And yeah, it's cost efficient. It's the way we understand how the White Sox operate.
Yeah, this is Jerry's world, Mike. This is what we got to live in.
that's the point. Is like when there was back to the original start of this answer in 2016 when they acquired their value, it was close to major league ready prospects, and you include Luis Robert. He was probably a year and a half away when they acquired him, so there was quick turnover. Beyond that, there was really nothing. So you continue to watch like Blake Rutherford, unfortunately, man, like Mike Rodolfo, unfortunately. Like
Yeah. Okay. So you're reconsidering. You think I'm ahead of them in the guest list. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
We're talking about guys who just unfortunately didn't pan out during that time. But in the meantime, the White Sox adopted a different strategy in the way that they acquired talent in the draft specifically. Over the last 3 years, we're seeing them do a ton of different things that we're not used to seeing the White Sox organization do in the draft. Garrett Crochet was a great pick, in my opinion, at the time because of the upside. It's just unfortunate that he didn't have the opportunity to start. But the philosophy behind that pick led into Jared Kelly as well in the second round of 20. And that's a high school arm that they overpaid for to get him to sign with the organization. The White Sox don't do that. They don't overpay for high school pitching. No. They also, they also signed Andrew Dahlquist and Matthew Thompson and young high school arms who are still. Matthew Thompson is going to, I think, take a step this year. I'm looking forward to seeing what Andrew Dahlquist can do. I don't want to get deep into all of these names, but as you look down the line every year, Colson Montgomery loved the pick. Athletic two-sport athlete, a 19-year-old high school player who can play shortstop, and scouts believe he can stick at shortstop, and if he doesn't, he can play third. But it's the philosophy. It's the commitment to the younger player because a guy like Tanner McDougal, for example. Mm-hmm. Tanner McDougal is a hard-throwing right-handed pitcher. And I'd love to get into I'm all over the place, but I'd love to get into the philosophy of what Mike Shirley is starting to do and some of the trends that we're seeing in his draft selections. But Tanner McDougal is a high school arm for Tommy John surgery and missed the entire year last year. He was a 9-year-old. If you take a college arm and he has that same injury, you're not going to see him until he's 23, and you already lost your development. So it's like that comes into play as well. It's just there is room, first and foremost, to fail, and you have time to continue the development. But also, it's a matter of inexpensive high school players turning into close to major league ready talent. And if you want to get cynical about this, you can trade them. And that's essentially the currency of the game at this point. So if you have an organization that values a guy like Ryan Burroughs, for example, an international signing, very underrated international signing, that costs the organization almost nothing. You can get a return back for whatever. So all in all, we're seeing a shift in philosophy in the way that they're building the organization. Now, the fruits of the labor isn't panning out yet. There is failure in development all the time. Baseball's really hard. It's just a matter of understanding where the organization was, where they are now, and where they could be in 5 years. Now, it sucks to say that because you want to see the White Sox capitalize in a window in a window where they said they were going to compete, but they're not spending money. So you got to sit back and take an extra half a step in understanding that they place their value within the organization, and it's going to take because these players have to graduate and they've developed at their own pace. And really, Chris Getz was at the forefront of that philosophy, working with the front office and saying, we got to do some of these things differently. We need a different draft strategy, and we got to understand what we have in our prospects and how to develop them. So, like personnel wise, Justin Jershly's been around the organization for a long time. Chris Johnson just got promoted. That was a guy who worked closely with Jake Berger and Gavin Sheets, and multiple examples of personnel within the organization that are helping development. Yes, we haven't seen a lot of it. Just I'm very encouraged by the strategies and the philosophies now taken and being applied by the organization.
I love that answer. Let me get to drink here. Father Zoe says, tipping because MSS can't. Hashtag alligator arms. Yeah, MSS claims he doesn't know how to use the tip button on YouTube. So thank you, Zoe, and fuck you, MSS. It's absolutely delicious white wine. And then I want to get to one other question from Baloney. Says, Brian Ramos, third best Ramos on the South Side. Yeah, that's right. Tree Z are 1 and 2. I'm obviously 1. And Tree Z is 2, so that's correct. I want to double back, Mike, real quick on Mike Shirley's draft philosophy because it caught mine and Treesy's eye that they weren't just drafting like the safest, blandest, vanilla-ist college guys. They started diving in all these directions. And in 2022's draftee of Noah Schultz, it was like, holy shit, they're taking a big gamble here. The guy's 6'9". He hasn't really pitched that much. He had a scholarship, and they were like, you know what? We're just outbid the scholarship. We want you to come here and pitch. And the early returns, when I say returns, I'm not talking about actually playing time. I'm talking about scouts weighing in on this. are outstanding. Tell me a little bit about Noah Schultz and just another reason why the White Sox are changing things a little bit down there in the minors.
Yeah, I mean, Noah Schultz is totally out of the blue. We did not expect the White Sox to select Schultz at 26, and so far we're getting steady reports of positivity. Now, that begins the optimism, and when you listen to the Future Sox podcast, I gush about Noah Schultz, but as I take a step back and understand, like, this is a player who is an example of what Mike Shirley likes to target: electricity in their delivery, but also it's a matter of specifically within the pitching. Shirley identifies a plus pitch, and we're seeing Noah Schultz get it up to 90 in high school with unbelievable length and stride. And in his delivery, the ball gets on you so quickly, and like he shortens the distance from the mound to home plate because of his length, as well as like the short arm sort of whiplash action that he has. He developed a two-seam, which he never threw in high school, but he was predominantly fastball slider. Now he's two-seam, four-seam, slider, changeup. And we're talking about a left-handed pitcher who can get it up there. So that's exciting in itself. But when you talk about the philosophy that Mike Shirley likes to implement in his draft strategy, you think about Peyton Paulette. That's probably a first-round pick if he didn't Tommy John surgery. He flat out said that they were not afraid of Tommy John surgery. Very encouraging to hear.
Want to gamble? Let's gamble, baby. I love it.
Very, very encouraging to hear. And you talk about Matthew Thompson. He was rated as the most athletic pitcher in the organization at the time of the draft. So that's a skill set that jumped off the page at him. But it's really examples like Eric Roche, unbelievable slider that goes along with the fastball, and there's projection quickly. Jared Kelly, a guy who believed in because of a pitch when they selected him. As we continue, as I'm thinking Tanner McDougal, I mentioned, who just jumped off the page with his RPMs. You're seeing Noah Schultz is another example. You're seeing these selections in the early rounds that they want to invest in because of these numbers that are jumping off the page at them in analytics. And I'm like, sweet. Like, we're not looking just at scout's eye here. We're looking at tangible evidence to say, if we work with this player, we have already a plus pitch that we can build on. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. And outside of the position player stuff, that's part of why we're seeing different strategies in the ranks within the organization.
I love it, Mike. Now, I'm going to put it this way. Treasy and I are going to be like this still at Chris Getz until we start getting some two-win players bubble up to the majors. But you gave me some good things to think about here, and you're right about the draft strategy changing. And you're right about the barrenness of it. It's almost like if someone doesn't know anything about blackjack and then they start learning how to play basic strategy. It's not a winning strategy. It's a less losing one. You're saying you put the baseline in there. Now it's time to like make the real jumps here. And so we'll be looking for this in the near future. And the top 10 lists that are coming out, you guys love your top 30s coming out. There's a lot of things to be excited about that group. Let's shift back towards the major league team and specific prospects for a second. The White Sox, seemingly, at least so far in this stage in the offseason, they've chosen not to invest in a second baseman. And right now it appears to be like it's going to be a battle between farmhand Lenin Sosa and a guy who's been on the major league roster for a couple years now, Romy Gonzalez. So for your money, Mike, gun to head, who you choosing, Romy Gonzalez, Lenin Sosa, to provide more value at second base for the White Sox this year, and why?
Oh, man. So I want to say Lenin Sosa. I think there's a upside in that player. However, I'm going to stick with Romy at this point because of a few reasons. I like it. Yeah, so I'm going to go Romy. One, I believe he's definitely gifted enough to stay at the major league level at this point, and I do have confidence that he can manage the position. Worst case scenario, you have Leary, and it's not the worst possible player that you can have at second base. Like, I understand the frustrations with Leary Garcia, but you got a backup plan there, and you allow Romy to fail. And it's unfortunate when you're saying, like, hey, we're going to have experiments in right field and at second base during a season in which you want to win the Central. But that's where the White Sox stand right now. They sacrificed 2 years, and this is the result. And also they neglected to address issues in multiple off seasons, which is frustrating, mainly because they were predicting Jose Rodriguez, Brian Ramos, Romy Gonzalez, Lenin Sosa, Yolbert Sanchez as part of this and next year's team. So
Yep.
in Romy's case, in 2019, he burst on the scene. Is somebody who he didn't burst on the scene. I'm sorry. In 2021, he burst on the scene. In 2019, he gave us indications that he was close. 20 obviously got canceled, didn't have an opportunity, but in 21, he just blew us all away and dominated in Birmingham. Scorching start, then he got hurt and missed some time, but he still had a really productive 2021. And then 2022 occurred. It was just one of the weirdest seasons I remember for a player who we expected so much out of. So if you look at the con situation, give Romy a full offseason, and he did play a little bit last year, and he looked outmatched. If you allow Romy the time to work into his own, I think it's going to be just fine, because you look at some of the options in free agency. I think if you're really serious about upgrading at second base, you need to trade, and you need to acquire somebody via trade.
Right. Yep.
But elsewhere, you're just getting replacement level talent, and I think you can get away with that with Leary and Lenine and Romy. So I'm going with Romy. I'm not going to give up on that prospect yet.
I love it. I first off, I think I kind of agree with this. It's worth a look, seeing what we have here. We have a pile of these guys who might be a guy. I think running out 250, 300 plate appearances of consistent play and seeing what you think you have here is a good idea, no matter who they choose. I agree with you on Romy, because Romy is tooled out. All right, when you see Romy on a Major League Baseball field, he can do things that Major League Baseball players do. He's got a lot of speed and range, and he's got pop. When he hits the ball, he hits it with authority. He was overmatched last year. You're right. He looked terrible. He had a 41% strikeout rate when they were playing him regularly in the last section of the year, where it was like month plus when Miguel Cairo took over, and they were just like, okay, here's the job. It's yours. 41% K rate, 0% walk rate. He was horrendous. But I was thrilled to hear, and Treasy and I had thought, man, Mike Tosar could really help a guy like that. Like, when we were looking at the rosters, we're like, if they're going to bring in these hitting gurus, I want that tooled up guy with the hitting gurus, and I want them to get rid of that fucking leg kick that seems to be slowing him down against fastballs. Let's get him in the lab and fix him, because he's got the athleticism. And so I agree with you there, and I like that. Lenyn Sosa, to me, he looks like he has a clue at the plate. That's good. My only problem is I'm not sure if he's athletic enough. Like, he looked a little goofy at shortstop in the limited looks I got of him. Maybe he'd be fine at second. But Romy feels like the better athlete and the bigger, stronger guy. So, like, I'd like to go with him first. But I guess we're about to see. I guess we're gonna find out. We're gonna have all season of seeing which one is which.
Yeah, Lenyn. When they called him up, he was scorching in Birmingham with Tony La Russa at the helm, and they didn't play him. And then after that, we never really heard from him again. And that was just an unfortunate situation for the kid, because it seemed like Tony played him out of spite. They said, "Oh, you want Lenyn Sosa to start? Let's bat him lead off." It's like,
he let him off that one game, and then okay. So there's that little window there. Now I wasn't as heartbroken as you prospect guys are, because I'm like, well, the guy's getting a reward for playing well, and he's getting 40 man, so he's going to get some more money, and they only need a guy for a few days, so they're going to bring him up. That's fine.
I get it. Yeah.
When he came back the second time, before they realized, ooh, you stink, we got to get Elvis Andrus in here immediately. He did play, and he he was overmatched, and that happens. What are you going to do? They sent him back to AAA, and he struggled for a little bit, but then he got red hot again. So, like, I haven't lost faith in him. I think the guy still will eventually come up here and hit. I'm just curious to see what the ending product ends up looking like. So, I think that's probably a guy. I think instead of can change the philosophy. Instead of spending $5 million for your bench guy, he could be a guy that comes up out of the minors. So once we shed Lurie Garcia, no shame to my legend. All right, Game 3 lives forever. We'll shed him, and then we get some of these younger guys that come up and kind of fill these spots and take over. Speaking of a younger guy that's coming up to fill a spot and take over, that I can't wait for. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little excited about this. I rarely let myself get excited given the the lack of impact that a White Sox rookie can provide. Oscar Colas. So I've been reading Oscar Colas stuff everywhere. I can't help but see it on Twitter. He's hitting gigantic home runs almost every time he's playing. He looks athletic in the outfield. He's a tool shed. And starting to look at some of the early prospect rankings. And when I read Baseball Prospectus, I thought to myself, man, should he be the number one prospect? He's gonna be in Chicago this year, and he might hit 20 bombs. And then I read Fangraphs, and despite Oscar Colas having this slash line against left-handed pitchers in the minors last year, he hit 362 with a 417 on base and 533 slug. In Eric Longenhagen's report, he said that the chase rate's significant enough that it might relegate him to strong side platoon outfielder. Now let's assume that's not just lazy reporting and that it was like an old note before he scorched. And his scorching is very BABIP baited. Let's be let's be fair about that. But assuming that is still the case, what could it mean there if a guy did succeed in the minors against lefties, but he does have the chase rate and it could be limiting? What could that kind of detail mean there, Mike, if the report is accurate?
I think there's a lot of validity to that report, mainly because the chase rate sort of, and no matter what level, will tell you about what this player's tendencies are early in his major league career. As Oscar Colas is going to do a lot of bad pitches, and just typically, right? I mean, I can understand this one. Once you get to the Major League Baseball, it looks on you. Like they got you. Yeah. So give them 60 plate appearances and they understand some of the things. But I just think it's incredibly hard to hit left-handed pitching in Major League Baseball. So when you're looking at a lefty-lefty matchup in AAA, I think it's a little different in Major League Baseball. And so you combine that with the chase rate that he already has. Yeah, there's room for concern. I think he's still going to be able to handle it. Because I think this is an advanced hitter. This is somebody who can, he's got unbelievable bat speed and he's got a ton of power. I'm really excited to get a close look at. Hopefully, if I get a chance to go out to spring training, we'll get to see, because I think it's so valuable to see somebody for your own eyes up close. There's no beating it. So when it comes to that, I think there is validity to it, mainly because of the chase rate. The chase rate is consistent throughout his career, even when we saw him play in Japan. So I think he's still going to be a major league regular. I'm not going to make him. I'm not going to regulate to a platoon yet.
But you'd be okay if there's if Shane McClanahan's on the hill, if the White Sox that was the day they chose to give him his day off. You'd be all right with occasionally a tough lefty. He just sits down until a pinch hitting opportunity is what you're saying.
What's alternative on the list at this point?
We don't have any. It's good.
That's the thing, So if you're asking, that's a little bit of an unfair situation on Oscar Colas, because when we talk about expectations, you're putting a lot on Gavin Sheets and Colas, and then you think about the bench spots when we were looking at the extended roster at 26-man. What's going on with Jake Berger? Is he going to be a part of this thing? Right. I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious about what the roster is going to look like when they break camp, and if Jake Marisnik makes the team or something, we'll see.
Or Billy Hamilton, or
right?
Yeah. I mean, they're starting to pile those guys up down there. The Victor Reyes of the world. It's like, just give us I can't tell if it's give us guys who can catch the ball in the outfield to help our minor league pitching, or if it's like these are real enforcements for the team. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, if all fails, we have a backup that we know has had experience before. That's all I can think about. And they need depth at AAA. They lost Mark Payton, which is unfortunate, local kid. I was hoping to see him at the big league level this year, but I wish they would do that with the pitching side of things, man. AAA is it's rough.
We were going nuts because Mark Payton came in at the end of the Cease almost no-hitter game. We were going nuts for him in 108. It was like, get that guy in there. Let's do it. You already answered my Christian Manning question, so one bonus for you. What position does Colson Montgomery end up at when he's up on the south side and we're screaming and yelling for him out of the right field corner?
I think he's the starting shortstop.
Wow, a bold pick in my opinion, given his size. But hey, let's go.
He can move. He's got great feet, and his athleticism makes me believe he's got enough bend to at least play the shortstop position at the early part of his career. I'm not dismissing the fact that he can play shortstop. He's passed all the tests. All signs point to him being the starting shortstop.
I fucking love it. Mike, thanks so much for coming on here. Thank you for bestowing your White Sox thoughts on us. Give me some interesting insights on the prospects and the farm system as a whole. And we're not trying to get everything right on the show. We're just trying to understand. Do you have anything you would like to plug before you leave me tonight?
Really appreciate that, Beef. It means a lot. It's always good to talk to you, and I'm glad to be among the first guests here on the Aju. It's awesome.
Appreciate that.
For at Future Sox, we continue to release our podcast every Tuesday. Thanks to everybody who also listens to that. Me and James Fox work that one, and we're also partners with Sox Machine. So Future Sox and Sox Machine work together. We're going to look ahead to our top 30, and I think now what we're thinking about doing is putting together individual top lists for positions. Now, we don't know if it's going to be 5 or 10, but we organize some of the best prospects at each position, so you can keep an eye on that over the coming months. And we're looking forward to opening day, and spring training's a month away. Pitchers and catchers report coming up soon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I love it.
I can't believe it. Well, thanks, Mike. Take care, my friend. It's great seeing you.
Thank you, Beef. Likewise.
All right, that was Mike Rankin. That was awesome. I really appreciated the insight there. just a little teaser for you guys. Next week's guest is going to be my man Alex Root. He's one of the brightest minds in Sox Twitter. We're going to talk about how he's gaslighting me about Jimmy Lambert's trade value. He has some huge value for Jimmy Lambert. I don't quite understand. I'm going to have him on here to talk about that. We'll talk about some other things. Thanks again to all of you who hit the tip jar in there. All of my 108 family was up in the comments. We appreciate your support. And we'll see you this week at the 108 podcast. Make sure you hit that, smash that like button, notifications, all that good shit. Tickle the undercarriage, you know it. Love all you guys. See you. Bye.